Good morning everyone. In previous class we talked about health information system where we discussed what health information system is, what are the different sources of health information, what are the kind of data or information we look for, and also different uses of health information. So at the end of that class we understood that we collect data from multiple different reliable sources. Now these data are nothing but observations, and there must be some way to transform this data into meaningful information. And here comes the role of biostatistics. Biostatistics is a very important part of medical science, but it is a little bit complicated topic, I would say. Since today's class is for the undergraduate students only, so we shall discuss only those parts which are important for the undergraduate students. This will help them during presentation of their project or family posting or even any kind of research they would get involved with during their undergraduate life. With further study, with further advancement of your career, there are definite scope for you to know biostatistics in details, and as I mentioned it earlier, it will be a little bit difficult and complicated, but let's talk about only the basic part right now. Now lots of definitions for statistics are available all over the books, internets, etc. This is the easiest one that I have come across. It is given by Croxton and Cowden, and according to them, statistics may be defined as the science which deals with collection, presentation, analysis and interpretation of numerical data. So here we are dealing with numbers, numerical data. After collection, there is a way of presentation of those data. You can present your finding in tabular form, means tables or different figures, or you can analyze the data and interpret the finding or result of your analysis. Biostatistics may be defined as application of statistical methods to medical, biological and public health related problems. So in medical science as well as biological, public health sector, application of statistics is basically known as biostatistics. Okay, so it is the scientific treatment given to the medical data derived from group of individuals or patients. So it can be based on patients as well as people who are not having any disease, maybe they are high risk people. So we can conduct any research or study in the population, general population, and whatever finding we get, we can also apply biostatistics on it, right? So that is the definition of statistics as well as biostatistics. Before we begin, we must know the classification of data. There are a lot of different classifications available, but these are the basic classification that you should know. The first is primary data or secondary data. Now I will give you an example, so it becomes very easy for you to understand. Say I want to know how many first year MBBS students in our state are hypertensive, right? For that, what do I have to do? Obviously, I have to measure their blood pressure. Now, the first thing that I can do is I can contact individual first year undergraduate student, MBBS student of our state, that means from different colleges, and measure their blood pressure, and from that I can tell how many of them are hypertensive. That is my primary data. So primary data is basically when the researcher himself collects the data or information, right? Alternatively, there is another thing that I can do. You know, before taking admission, all the students have to go through the medical test, right? So that means they also have this blood pressure documented somewhere. If I can get my hands on those documented blood pressure, that means the data have already been taken by someone. I am just taking the set of data from him, right? So I can ask the university to provide me with the list of all the students along with their blood pressure recorded. That will also serve the purpose. So that is my secondary data. So secondary data is when the data that I am working with have been collected by someone else. So this is the difference between primary data and secondary data. The next one is qualitative data and quantitative data. Some variables can be anything, like my gender can be a variable, my age can be a variable, my blood pressure, blood sugar level can be a variable, etc. So when a variable itself cannot be measured, only its frequency can be measured, it is a qualitative data. But when the variable itself can be measured as well as its quantity can also be measured or frequency can be measured, it is a quantitative data. So that means the frequency can be measured for both qualitative as well as quantitative data. It is the variable itself that makes the difference. If the variable can be measured, it is a quantitative data. If the variable cannot be measured, it is a qualitative data. I will give you an example. I am talking about blood sugar, right? So say we are talking about fasting blood sugar. We can measure the fasting blood sugar of any person. That means the blood sugar itself can be measured, so the variable can be measured. Also, we can know different persons having a particular level of blood sugar. Say how many of them are having less than 110 unit milligram per deciliter, or how many of them are having 126 or more. So that is the basically classification of diabetes. So here, since the blood sugar can be measured, it is a quantitative data. Now let us talk about sex or gender. It can be male or female. You can measure the frequency, that in a particular class how many of the students are male and how many of the students are female. That part you can measure. But can you measure the variable itself? Can you measure male or female? The numbers can be measured. So that means some variables like gender, religion, occupation, these things cannot be measured. Only their frequencies can be measured. That is your qualitative data, right? So this is qualitative as well as quantitative data. Another is continuous data versus discrete data. For any variable, now mind it, this is generally for quantitative data, this classification. For any variable, if all the values are possible, then continuous data. Otherwise, if all the values are not available or possible, then it is known as a discrete data. For example, how many fingers I have in my hands? I have 10. Hrithik Roshan has 11. Anyway, so are all the values possible? Can we have decimals in the number of fingers? No, we cannot. So that means all the values are not possible. I can have 10, I can have 9, God forbid if I have an amputation, or if there is polydactyly, he can have more than 10, but it can never be in fraction. Decimals are not possible. So this is a discrete data. What about continuous data? All the values will be possible. Maybe the values will be in a given range. Okay, so a person's age can be say from 0 to 100 or maybe more than 100. It cannot be negative, but any value is possible in between them. So age is a continuous data. I ask my student if blood pressure is a continuous data or not. Say let's talk about systolic blood pressure. If we take the sphygmo, the mercury or the aneroid, it gives us the record in even numbers, 120, 122, 124, like that, right? That means we do not get 121, 123, 125 like this. So it does not mean these values are not possible. Okay, if you are using a digital BP machine, you can get odd numbers also. Now, can we get fraction in blood pressure? say 125.3. Mind it, blood pressure can be of any value, but the instruments that we are using do not have the ability to give the values in decimals. So, this is the limitation of the instrument that we are using, but not the variable itself. Since blood pressure can be of any value, it can be 125.37, it is a continuous data, right. So, you have to understand whether all values are possible for a data or not. If all values are possible, then the variable is continuous, otherwise it is a discrete. So, this is the basic classification of different type of data. This is important because what kind of analysis we are going to perform with the data depends on the type of data. Now, again we are not going to cover the analysis part, it is a little bit advanced and beyond the scope of today's discussion. After having the data, we can present the data for better understanding. It can be presented in tabulation form, that means simple table or frequency distribution table, or in figures like charts and diagrams. There are different type of diagrams like bar diagram, simple bar diagram, multiple bar diagram or component bar diagram. There can be histogram, there can be frequency polygon, pie chart, etc. Now, before I go any further, here I must mention something. Now, how to make tables, how to make the different diagrams, bar diagrams or pie chart, etc., histogram, etc. All these things will be discussed in details in your practical class. So, that is why I will not waste any time describing this part. I will just show you few diagrams and tables so that you can understand what I am talking about. But again, I am not going to into the details of how to prepare them. Okay. So, this is a simple table showing the monthly expenditure of any random family. So, you can see these are the different items on which the family spends. So, in a month the family spent 5,000 rupee in Indian rupee on food, 2,000 on clothing, 1,000 on health, maybe LPG 400 rupees, 300 rupees on electricity, addiction 300. Total of 9,000 expenditure per month. We can also make another column here and mention the percentage, that means of total expenditure, how much or what percentage has been spent on food, what percentage has been spent on clothing, etc. So, these vertical things are known as columns, horizontal things are known as rows. If we express this thing, the same table in a diagram, I would say the best way should be a pie chart. So, this is an example of pie chart. Here all the items on which the expenditures have been made are expressed as different wedges of a circle. Pi means circle. I am not going to tell you how to make a pie chart, but 2 points I must mention here because I have seen students year after year making the mistake. Now, first thing that I must mention is always start a pie chart at 12 o'clock position here, this vertical line. This is where the pie chart starts. Okay. Point number 2 is it is ideal if you make the wedges according to descending order. So, as you can see, this blue part is the majority of the pie or the circle, followed by the next major part, that is 22%. The smaller part is followed by even smaller segments. So, this should be in descending order. I have seen lots of students as well as professionals starting a pie chart randomly from here or here, anywhere. Also, they have not maintained this order, this descending order. Say they have the first wedge they have made is 56%, followed by a 5%, maybe then 11%, 3%, 22% and another 3%. Now, this is not wrong, I must tell you, but this is not also ideal. Ideally, it should be started at 12 o'clock position and descending order must be followed clockwise. Okay. Next, this is a simple bar diagram. These are the bars, these vertical lines. This is just a random example. This is the number of COVID cases in West Bengal as it stands on 13th of August 2020. So few districts have been mentioned, as you can see. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. X-axis denotes different districts. I have mentioned 5 districts only, and y-axis the total number. So Kolkata having the highest number of COVID cases so far, followed by North 24 Parganas, followed by Howrah, then South 24 Parganas. There are many states in between, Bankura and this rest. Bankura I have been showing, that is 1271 cases. So the height actually denotes the frequency. The longer the bar, the more frequency is present in that particular portion. Okay, so this is a simple bar diagram. This is a multiple bar diagram. So what is the difference? Unlike this, we have two different bars stuck together. So what they are denoting? They are denoting male and female. The blue bars are male, the orange bars are female. And we have showed two different districts, Kolkata and Bankura. So in Kolkata, male population is about, say these are in percentage, okay, so 60% male and 40% female. In Bankura, we have about 55% male and 45% female. So that means from this bar, we can compare the male and female population of two different districts. This is an example of multiple bar. What about composite bar or component bar rather? That means each bar has different components. So we have made urban and rural distribution, and in each bar we can see the age distribution of the population. So in urban areas, so blue area denotes the population less than 15 years, orange 15 to 65 years, and this gray area 65 years and above. So this 15 to 65 population is more in urban areas, right? Less than 15 years more in rural areas, and 65 years and above more in urban areas. So you can compare the length of this particular segments and also can know which population is more in urban or rural. So this is a composite bar diagram. Now coming to the measures of central tendency. We measure the central tendency by mean, median and mode. The first one we shall talk about the mean, arithmetic mean, geometric mean and harmonic mean, but in medical science we deal with arithmetic mean. This is the simplest mean, we also known as the average. So mean, sum of all the values of all observations, total number of observations, that is the total number of subjects denoted by n. So this is the formula. So if I want to know the average age of all the students in your batch, I have to add up the age of individual students and divide it by the number of students present in the class. That will give my mean or average age. So this is the arithmetic mean. This is simplest. What about median? Now median is the middlemost value. How to calculate the median? This is where the students make a very common mistake. Suppose in a data set you will be given the different say hemoglobin level of 10 students. They will be in random order. The first thing that you have to do is arrange them in ascending order, starting from the lowest value and progressing towards the highest value. Then you have to count how many numbers or values are there. So if the n, the number of values, are odd, then n plus 1 divided by 2th value is your median value. If it is even, then you have to look for the n by 2th value as well as the n by 2 plus 1th value, and you have to average these two values to get your median. Sounds complicated? I will show you the example. So this is the diastolic blood pressure of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9%. You can see they are haphazard. We have 83, then 75, then 81. So first thing you have to do is arrange them ascending order. So we have arranged them in ascending order, and these are the values. So 9 means it is an odd value. So we have to find out n plus 1 divided by 2, that is 9 plus 1 divided by 2 means 10 by 2 or 5th value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is your median value. This is the 5th value of this data series. Same thing here, but we have 10 values now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We arrange them in ascending order. Now we have to find out the n plus 1 divided by 2th value, that is, let us see here, n by 2 first. So n by 2 is 10 by 2, that is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5th value, as well as n by 2 plus 1th value. So n by 2 is 5 plus 1, that means the 6th value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So this is my middle two values, that is the 5th value as well as 6th value. We have to average them or take the mean of these two values, and that will be your median. Now remember, this median can be different from any in the data series. For better understanding, in case this is an odd number of observations, the middle value, the median value will be always a part of the data set. So 79 is present here, you can see there is 79 here. But if it is even number, then you have to take the average of this middle two values. This average value may or may not be present in the data table. Okay, so remember this. So this is about median. Mode. Mode is the most common value that repeats itself in the data set. Okay, we come across two or more values repeating themselves same number of times. In such cases, the distribution is said to be bimodal or multimodal. So in a given data set, if there is one value which is present in maximum number, that is my mode. There may be two values or more than two values which are occurring more than once, then it can be bimodal or multimodal, right? So attendance of 20 students in percentage. So these are the different percentage of attendance of 20 students. If you look at the data set, you will find the mode which is the most frequently occurring value in this data set is 75. So this is my mode. For detection of mode, there is no need to arrange them ascending or descending order, but you can do that for your benefit, for your convenience, because it will be easier for you to find out which number is occurring more than once. Okay. So after the measures of central tendency, we shall talk about the measures of dispersion. So that means how individual values in a data set are dispersed or away from each other. There are three methods we shall talk about: the range, the mean deviation and the standard deviation. So you can see they are dispersed from each other. The first one is the range. Range is the difference between the two extremes, that is the difference between the maximum and minimum observation. Okay, so range is basically maximum observation minus minimum observation. One of the drawback of range is that it uses only the extreme observations and ignore the rest. Suppose in an auditorium a show is going on and there are audience of different age. Maybe the lowest one we have is 3 years old kid and the oldest one we have is about say 85 years old man. So the range is here from 3 to 85, so 82 years. So you can see if you are talking about range, we are mostly focusing on the extreme of the value, the 3-year-old child as well as the 85-year-old man. Maybe most of the audience are around 45 to 50 years, but we are ignoring that. We are not even looking at that fact. We are only bothered about the extremes of the value, and this is the drawback of range, because it does not tell us much about the distribution of the individual person's age in the given data set. The next one is mean deviation. Here average of the deviation from arithmetic mean is measured, and this is the formula. So if we have a data set, we have different observations, we can take the mean value of it. We know already how to calculate the arithmetic mean, and then we look how individual data is different from the mean value, and we take the average of that difference. See, this is the diastolic pressure of 10 individuals. This is the example taken from your book of Park, so it is available there, you can look in your book also. So we have the blood pressure DBP of 10 individuals, and these are the values. So we have written the values here, right? If we add them up, it is 810 divided by 10, because we have 10 individuals. So that is our mean value 81. So in the next column, we have made the arithmetic mean, which is 81 for each of them. Next, we find out the deviation, or how much deviated this value is from the mean, right? So the arithmetic mean is 81. The diastolic BP of this person is 83. So he is 2 units deviated on the positive side, because 83 is more than 81. So this is 2. 75, which is less than 6. So 6. Since this is on the negative side, we have mentioned the negative sign here. Same, these two are exactly same, so we have mentioned 0. All right. So these are the individual difference of the particular observation from the mean value, x minus x bar. X bar is mean. Then we add them up. Now remember, we are trying to find out the deviation of the individual observation from the mean value. Now whether this is on the positive side or on the negative side does not matter. So that is why while adding them up, we must ignore the negative signs. So we just add the numbers here. So the add up number will be 56. Okay. Ignoring the positive or plus or minus signs. So x minus x bar is 56, summation of x minus x bar. Mean deviation is 56 divided by n, which is 10. So this is 5.6. So this is the formula. X minus x bar summation is 56 and divided by n, that is 10, 5.6. This is my mean deviation. So after having the individual observations, we must calculate the mean, and we must find out how much difference is there between the individual observation with its mean value. It can be plus sign or minus sign depending on which side it is, but while adding this difference or deviations, we must ignore the signs. Whatever is the add up value, we shall divide it by the number of observations we have, and that will give us our mean deviation. Okay. Coming to the little bit advanced part, that is standard deviation. Now in statistics, when we are measuring the deviation, this is the most commonly used method. So most frequently used measure of deviation is standard deviation. It is also known as root means squared deviation. Larger standard deviation means larger is the spread of distribution. That means the data, individual observations in the data set are deviated from each other. Okay. This is the formula. Looks complicated, but I will explain. Just remember, in the denominator we have either n or n minus 1. If the sample size or the number of observations, that is n, is less than 30, then we use n minus 1. If it is 30 or more, we can use n. Okay. So if it is 40, we can use 40 here. If it is say 25, so we will use 25 minus 1. Also, the whole thing is under square root. People make the mistake and make only the numerator under square root. It is not so. The whole thing is under square root, the numerator as well as denominator. I will show you the example, so it will be easier for you to understand. Okay. Again, same thing. The diastolic blood pressure of 10 individuals, and they have been mentioned here. All right. So what we do here is we add them up, which is 81, and then we divide it by the total number of observation n. That will give us our mean value, right? So mean value is 81. The add up value will be 810. So if you remember this table, same thing. 810 divided by 10 is 81. That is your mean value. All right. Next, we measure the same thing, x minus x bar. Previous table, same thing we have measured, right? Deviation from the mean. So how much individual value is deviated from the mean value? It can be positive or negative. In mean deviation, we were adding this up, ignoring the plus or minus sign, but while measuring the standard deviation, we shall rather square these values. So x minus x bar is this, x minus x bar whole square. So 2 square is 4, 6 square is 36, 0 square is 0, 2 minus 2 square is 4. So even if there are negative sign, when you square it, they get cancelled. So here we have the squared value of x minus x bar, and we have to add them up. So this is my summation of x minus x bar whole square. So if you look at the formula, this is the summation of x minus x bar whole square. In this 482. So the numerator value will be 482. All right. The observation is, or n is 10. 10 is less than 30. So that is why I shall put 10 minus 1. So 10 minus 1, 9. If we square root it, it will be 7.31. So we can say in the given data set, the mean value is 81 and the standard deviation is 7.31. All right. Now, what is the importance of standard deviation? Why do we need to know about standard deviation? That is another important point. I shall talk to you. Okay. So in this slide, you can see we are talking about normal distribution and normal curve. Now, this is one of the commonly asked short note from biostatistics that you can encounter during your examination. Normal distribution and normal curve are important concepts in statistical theory, of course. So let us suppose we collect the hemoglobin values of a very large number of people and make a frequency distribution with narrow class intervals. We are likely to get a smooth symmetrical curve. Okay, so let me explain you this part. Suppose I have a huge number of participants in my research. So I want to know their hemoglobin level. Now, to get a normal curve or to have a data set normal distribution, it is ideal to have a huge number of observations. Suppose we are having 20 or 30 observations, it is very likely that the distribution will not follow normal distribution. But if you are having a large number of observations, suppose I am collecting data from 1000 or 2000 or even 3000 individuals, then the data we shall have will probably follow normal distribution. It still may not follow normal distribution, but it is very likely that it will follow normal distribution. So that is why it is important of a very large number of people. Also, narrow class interval. So how can we make the class interval while making the data set from the hemoglobin level? Suppose the lowest one we had is 8 and the highest one we had 50, okay, gram per deciliter. So we can make 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 14, 14 to 16, like this. So 2 units of distribution. Class interval is 2 here. So how many intervals shall we have? 8 to 10 1, 10 to 12 2, 12 to 14 3, and 14 to 16 4. So we have only 4 class intervals here. On the other hand, we could make the class intervals even narrower. So rather than 2 units, we can make it 0.5 units. So 8 to 8.5, 8.5 to 9, 9 to 9.5, 9.5 to 10, like this. So in that case, we shall get about, I don't know, maybe 8 class intervals. No, not even, not more than that. I think 16 class intervals, right? So 8 to 8.5, 8.5 to 9, 9 to 9.5, 9.5 to 10, like this. We will get 16 class interval between 8 and 16. So what happens here? When we make these class intervals very narrow or small, and also when we make the observation from a large number of people, the distribution is supposed to follow normal distribution. And when you make the histogram, it will show a smooth symmetrical curve, which is known as normal curve. So such a distribution is called normal distribution, and the curve is called a normal curve. The shape of the curve will depend upon the mean and the standard deviation, which in turn will depend upon the number and the nature of observations. So we can say, I will show you the curve later. So from this particular slide, the two things you have to understand is, if a data set follows a very narrow class intervals, also the data have been collected from a large number of people, the distribution will probably follow a smooth symmetrical bell shaped curve, which is known as normal curve, and this distribution is known as normal distribution. Again I am saying this may or may not happen, but the chances are very high if we follow these two criteria. So what are the characteristics of a normal distribution? It is a bell shaped symmetric curve. Okay, so if I show you the curve, you will understand it looks like a bell and it is symmetric. Since it is symmetric, the curve on either side of the mean is a mirror image of the other side, obviously. That is why it is called symmetric. The mean, the median and the mode will coincide. Highest frequency, that means the number of observations for a particular value, is in the middle around the mean, and the lowest at both extremes. The total area under the curve is equal to 100% or 1. It is not 1%, 1 as a whole. And the most important relationship of the normal curve is area under the curve. So let me explain you these things before I go there. So this is what a normal distribution curve look like. So this is a bell shaped curve, the central value having the highest number of frequency. So since when we draw a curve, the y-axis denotes the frequency and x-axis denote the values the highest, this is the frequency here, the highest frequency is in the middle and this is the mean value. Alright. Now coming to the previous slide, we are talking about the area relationship, the area under the curve relationship. The proportional area enclosed between mean and multiple of standard deviations is constant. That means mean plus minus 1 SD is 68% of the total area, mean plus minus 2 SD is 95% of the total area, and mean plus minus 3 is 99% of the total area. These make no sense, I know right now, so I will describe them. First of all, let me remind you, you know what is standard deviation from this table. So this is a table. Suppose it's not 10 individuals, so this is 10,000 individuals, a huge number of sample. Also, after calculating the mean value, we got the 81 mean, and as well as standard deviation is 7.31. So we have to remember this part. Now coming to this particular slide, this is my mean value, right? This is the highest frequency, the peak of the curve. So since the x axis denotes the value, so this will be the mean value, which is 81. All right. These lines, vertical lines, denotes the standard deviation mark. Standard deviation is 7.31. So for our convenience, say let's call it 7. Okay, so our standard deviation is 7. It's easier to calculate. So standard deviation plus or minus, mean plus minus 1 standard deviation means mean value and the value of standard deviation from its either side. Mean is 81, standard deviation, that is plus minus 7. So that means 81 plus 7 is 88 and 81 minus 7 is 74. So this will be my 74, this will be my 88. So that means all the people in those 10,000 population having 74 to 88 millimeter of mercury of diastolic blood pressure will be in this area, right? Because this is mean value, this is minus 1 standard deviation, this is plus 1 standard deviation. So mean value is 81, this is plus 7, this is minus 7. 81 is plus 7 is 88, 81 minus 7 is 74. So 74 to 88, this is the area, and all the people which are having diastolic blood pressure between 74 and 88 will be in this area, and this area actually comprise the 68% of the total population. Since I had 10,000 population, so this will be 6,800 population in this area who are having diastolic blood pressure of 74 to 88, right? Now if we are talking about 2 standard deviation on either side, that is 2 standard deviation meaning 2 into 7, that is 14. So 81 plus 14 is 95, 81 minus 14 is how much? 67. So 67 to 95, this is the area where all the people having diastolic blood pressure between 67 and 85, and they will comprise the 95% of the whole population. So 9,500 people of that given population will have blood pressure in between, how much did I say, I forgot, 67 and 95, I guess, yes, 95 millimeter of mercury. Same thing here. So minus 21 and plus 21. So whatever are the values, 99.7% of the population will have diastolic blood pressure between these two values, right? So this is the importance of standard deviation. If you have the mean value and if you know the standard deviation, you can assume how many people are having a particular range of blood pressure or any variable since you know the formula here. So, for plus minus 1 standard deviation it is 68%, for plus minus 2 standard deviation it is 95%, and plus minus 3 this is 99.7%, right. So, you have to understand this much. So, this is the importance of standard deviation. Here are few normal curves, they are all bell shaped. Look at the first one, this is a bell shaped curve, a flat, this is like a normal bell shaped, and this is a peaked bell shaped. They have all the same midline. That means for all these normal curves the mean value is same, but in common term we can say their wideness varies. So, this one is less wide, this one is more wide, and this is the widest. The wider the normal curve, it means the standard deviations is more, alright. So, in the flat curve the standard deviation value will be higher as compared to the middle one, and this one will have the narrowest standard deviation, although the mean value of them are same. In curve number 2 you can see there are 3 different means, that is why 3 different vertical lines, but the wideness are all same, right, roughly speaking. So, that means the standard deviation of each curve or each data set are same, but the mean value are different. That is why they are not overlapping, they are placed side by side and they look similar because of the same standard deviation, right. Okay, moving on. Next very important part is sampling. So, there are certain terminologies you have to understand. First is population. Population is a group that is studied by the researcher. Okay, I will give you an example and that will be easier for you to understand. So, I told you that I want to know how many first year MBBS students in our state of West Bengal are hypertensive. So, that means I want to know the blood pressure status of all the undergraduate MBBS students who are in first year, and that will be my population. So, the population is all the first year undergraduate MBBS students of West Bengal. This is my population. Whatever finding I get from my study, the result will be applicable to this population, right. I cannot tell whether the second year or the third year MBBS students or the teachers, doctors or the patients are hypertensive or not, because I have not conducted my study on those people. So, I have to know what my population is. Now, it is very difficult for me to visit individual medical college, then contact individual first year student to measure their blood pressure. So, what I do? I will rather collect a sample. Sample is the selected part of the population, right. So, maybe I have selected Bankura Sammiloni Medical College. Since I am a faculty here, obviously it will be more convenient for me to contact the first year students of Bankura Sammiloni Medical College. So, that will be my sample. Just to mention here, it is not like I can select Bankura Sammiloni Medical College like that because it is convenient to me. I can do that, but it is not ideal. I shall come to that part later. Okay, so I have selected my sample. What is sampling? The process of selecting a part of population. So out of all the first year students in different medical colleges, how I shall select my sample, that means which students actually I am going to conduct my study on, that method or process is known as sampling. All right. What is the sample size? The number of people in the selected sample. So, maybe after some mathematical calculation, which is known as sample size determination, I have decided that I need 100 students to conduct my research on. We know that this year in Bankura Sammiloni Medical College, 200 students have taken admission. So, I do not need all of them. I need 100 of them. So that is what my sample size is. So maybe in whole West Bengal there are say 1500 MBBS students, out of which I have taken the sample from Bankura Sammiloni Medical College and the sample size is 100. What is sampling frame? The list of individual or people included in the sample. Okay. So that means this 100 students must be given some kind of identification number or code, whatever, so that I can identify them during my study. These assigned numbers or codes will be used for individual sample in the sampling unit. Sampling technique, it refers to the technique or procedure used to select members of the sample. So this is more or less like sampling, but how we are selecting the sample is known as sampling technique. Same thing basically. So I will give you some examples later. It will be easier for you to understand now. So this is the bigger population. There are a lot of people, but I have selected only 5 of them. So that is my sample. Okay, understood. Moving on. What are the advantages of sampling? Why do you do sampling? First of all, time saving, economical and accuracy. So of course, if I measure the blood pressure of 100 students, it will be less time consuming as compared to measuring blood pressure of 1000 or 1500 students. Also, not to forget that I have to travel to different part of the state and contact them individually. So that is time saving as well as economical. So a lot of, I should say, not only economical but lot of resources, manpower, man, money, material, everything can be saved if we apply sampling method. And accuracy. Smaller the sample, of course there is less chance of making mistakes, and we can conduct the measurements more accurately with more precision. So accuracy is of a positive point in case of sampling. What are the disadvantages of sampling? There can be bias. That means which group of people or individuals I am selecting as sample, the whole outcome of my study can depend on it. So if I make any bias, suppose I say no, I like this guy or I like that guy or that particular group of people and I want them to be included in my study, that means I can be biased in some way. It should not be like that. Next is need of specialized knowledge. So a person selecting sample should be aware of the different sampling methods, sampling techniques, how to take the samples, what are the sample size required, that means how many samples are to be taken. So this specialized knowledge must be there. Selection of true representative sample. Alright, so this is very important. For example, difficult to select the right representative sample. Suppose, as I mentioned, I am talking about diastolic blood pressure. I want to know how many hypertensives are there. Say I have selected few students in my sample who are on antihypertensive method, antihypertensive drugs. So that means they are actually hypertensive, but their blood pressures are controlled because they are taking some drug. So my study result will show that they are normotensive, but actually they are hypertensive since they are already taking hypertensive medication, antihypertensive medication. So that is why they are actually not the representative of the sample. We must select those people who are not on any kind of medication for hypertension. Only in that case we shall know how many of them are truly hypertensive or pre-hypertensive or normotensive, etc. Right? Sometimes the population is too small or too heterogeneous. If the population is very small, it is very difficult to select a part of that population as sample, or if the individual in that population are very different from each other, then also these differences can act on the finding of our study. So that is another disadvantage of sampling. Now, what are the different types of sampling? there are mainly two types of sampling. One is probability sample, another is non-probability sample or sampling method, whatever. Probability sample is a method of sampling that uses random selection so that all units or cases in the population have an equal probability of being chosen. So, in simple word, I shall select the sample from the population randomly. So, not like I want that particular person in my study or that particular person in my study. It is not like that. You have to follow some rules and the samples will be selected randomly. This is not according to the will of the researcher. And non-probability sampling does not involve random selection and methods and are not based on rationale of probability theory. So, this randomness during the collection or selection of the sample are not present in non-probability sampling. I will give you the examples of different types and it will be easier for you to understand. So, probability sampling, as I mentioned, that selects subjects with known probability. So, you will know what are the chances of this persons being selected, and every unit in the population has equal chance of being selected. Probability samples are important when one wishes to generalize to the larger population because one knows the response will fit to the characteristics of the population. So, to put it in simple words, if I am taking a sample, that means a short segment of the larger population, and I am conducting my study on that particular sample, if the sampling method was following any probability sampling method, then I can say whatever is the finding of my study within the sample can be applied to the whole population. So, if I find that about 20% of the students are hypertensive in my 100 student sample from Bankura Sammiloni Medical College, if I have taken this sample following the probability sampling method, then I can say confidently that this result is also applicable to 1500 students all over the West Bengal. Even though I have made my judgment or conclusion based on the study that I conducted on only 100 students. Okay. But as I told, we have to follow the probability sampling for that. What are the different types of probability sampling? Simple random sampling, systematic random sampling and stratified random sampling. And what are the non-probability sampling? Non-probability sampling is a sampling technique where samples are gathered in a process that does not give all individuals in the population equal chance of being selected, right? So, there is a problem with that, since not all the individuals have equal and known chance of being selected, as we mentioned here in case of probability sampling. Selection does not depend upon the laws of probability, and sample is selected deliberately by the researcher on his own choice. So, the researcher himself decides which individual will be in his study as a part of the sample. So, since he decides, not all the individuals in the population have the same probability. So, that is why the laws of probability are denied in non-probability sampling. What are the types of non-probability sampling? Some examples are purposive sampling, convenience sampling, snowball sampling, quota sampling and self-selection sampling. So, let us discuss individual. First one is the simple random sampling, which is a probability sampling. It assures that each element in the population has an equal chance of being selected. And the selection is free from bias. I have given an example. Suppose there are 200 students, which is considered to be the population in the class, and we need to conduct a short survey on them. We decide that a sample of 20 students would be sufficient for this purpose. In order to get the sample, what do? We make simple random sampling. So, out of 200 students, which is the population, we make a sample of 20 students. So, we can assign a number from 1 to 200 to each student. Suppose they have their roll number from 1 to 200, which is the sampling frame. Sampling frame means a record of individual in the population with their identification number. So, here the roll numbers are taken to be their identification number. Then we can use a table of randomly generated number, which is known as random number table. Or we can say it simply, suppose in a large bowl we have made 200 sheets with number from 1 to 200 written on them, and we randomly pick up 20 sheets. So, whatever are the numbers written on them, those individuals with those roll numbers will be selected for my study. So, that is simple random sampling, right? Okay. Next one is the systematic random sampling. Now, this is the simplest one and this is the best one, to be honest, right? Systematic random sampling means there is a system that we are following. Systematically, the individuals are selected as sample. So, there is a gap or interval between each selected unit in the sample. For this, we calculate what is known as sample interval, or K, right? K is given by n by n. What is n? The total number of population. And what is small n? The number of sample. So, I will give you this example. So, in the previous example, I told you that out of 200 students, which is my population, I need only 20, which is my sample size. So, I have to find out the sample fraction or sample interval. Okay, that is n by n. N is 200, n is 20, that is 10. Next step is, that is step number 1. Number the units on your frame from 1 to n. Tick. It means the first number we have to, the first individual we have to select is randomly, completely randomly, but it has to be between this number 1 to 10. So, we make a sheet of 1 to 10 different sheets are there, and we select or pick up any one individually and randomly. Say we have picked the sheet which is the 7th one. So, that means in that sheet number 7 is written. So, roll number 7 will be my first sample. So, just to clear here, I have measured the sample frame, sampling interval or sampling fraction, that is a K value, which is 10. Next, I have to select my first individual in the sample, but the first individual must have a roll number or identification code less than this value. So, that is why we have made 10 sheets, since this is 10 sheets written 1 to 10 on each of them and selected one randomly. Suppose the 7th roll have come up and this is my first sample. Next, I have to add this sample interval or sampling frame number to the selected first sample. So, since the first one is 7, we have to add 10 to it, that is 17. Then add another 10 to the second one, that is 27, 37, 47, 57. So, as you can see, after selecting the first one, we are adding up this sample interval or sample fraction to the first number and getting the next number. So, at the end of the selection I shall have 17th, 27th, 37th, 47th, 57th, like this, 167th, 177th, 187th and 197th. After this we cannot have because we have roll number up to 200. So we have 20 students present as my sample from this class. So this is systematic because I have followed this gap constantly, which is the 10, that is the sample interval, that means the interval between each sample. So that is why this is known as a systematic random sampling. Next one is the stratified random sampling. A population is divided into homogeneous mutually exclusive subgroups called strata, and a sample is selected from each stratum. So that means in a population some variables can act and they may have some role on the finding. So if the distribution of say age or gender is different in the population, that can have some effect on the results also. So that is why, to guarantee that all groups in the population are adequately represented, we follow the stratified random sampling. Example, among the 200 students, suppose in this 200 students we are talking about, 70 are from urban areas. So that means 30 are from rural areas. Also, girls comprise 50% of all students. So boys and girls ratios are how much? 1:1. And we need a sample of 200 students, right? So what do we do? And stratified random sampling. So we have 200 students. 75% is from urban areas. 70% of 200 is 140 students. So they are from urban areas, and the rest 60 students are from rural areas. So this is my first strata based on their residence. Okay. So I have separated them, 140 here from urban and 60 from here rural. In the next strata, I know that my boy student and girl student ratio is 1:1, that is 50%, 50%. So this 140, there is 70 girl students and 70 boy students from urban areas, and among these 60 students, 30 girl students and 30 boy students are from rural areas. Okay. So I need sample of 20 students. For that, if I maintain this ratio correctly, then if I select 7 girl students from urban, 7 boy students from rural, boy students from urban, 3 girl students from rural and 3 boy students from rural, you will see I have 7 plus 7 plus 3 plus 3, that is 20 students as my sample. Also, I have 14 students from urban and 6 students from rural, that is 70% and 30% rural urban differentiation is maintained, and 10 girl students, 10 boy students, that means 50-50 gender ratio is also mentioned and maintained. So this is an example of stratified random sampling. That means we have maintained different strata and collected my sample accordingly, so that individual representation of strata are maintained. So here the urban and rural distribution is also maintained among the samples. Also the boy and girl ratio is also mentioned among the samples. Now coming to the non-probability sampling. The first one is the purposive sampling, which is also known as the judgmental sampling. Participants from whom information can be obtained easily are purposively selected. Okay. So the researcher decides who are the people from whom informations can be obtained easily. Okay. These are the people who are selected for the study. This is done to avoid people who might not be interested in participation in the study. So there are some people who are unwilling, so you can avoid those people because you are not going to gather any information from them. So you can selectively discard them, also selectively select those who are willing to participate, or not willing, rather you understand that it is easier for you to extract any information from this particular people. So you can see this is the hand of the researcher. He is hand picking the sample himself among all the people. What is convenience sampling? Participants are selecting on basis of easy accessibility. So in a district, some primary schools were selected based upon their location beside main road. So suppose there is some research going on the school going children, and so this is a distant area and a distant district. People from Kolkata are going to that district, so they select a school which is beside the main road because they are traveling by car. So since this is based on their convenience, this is known as convenience sampling. So this is the researcher marked in circle, red circle, and people who are in closest vicinity, so they have been taken as the sample. So this is convenience sampling. What is snowball sampling? Also known as the network sampling. So this type of sampling is applied when the target population is hidden or hard to reach, such as drug addicts, commercial sex workers, individuals with HIV/AIDS, etc., or the disease in question is rare, where the study subjects are hard to find. Okay. So this kind of people are very difficult to find out, and maybe because of some sensitive questions or issues, they do not want to come out, so you have to find them, and this is very difficult for all the researchers sometimes, and they do not get adequate sample. So what they do, they go for the snowball sampling. So one study subject is asked to identify the person with the same exposure in the question for the purpose of finding the next subject, right? The researcher then goes to the identified persons and continues the same way until the required sample size is obtained. So I will show this individual. Suppose the researcher is trying to find out what is the prevalence of sexually transmitted disease. Okay, so STD is a little bit of sensitive issue. Not a lot of people do not want to talk about that, or want to give you information regarding that. So we have identified our first case. This is my first sample. I have collected all the samples from him and asked him about his any other person he knows who are also having the same kind of disease. All right. So this is the one. He identifies two more. So this one and this one. We go to them individually, collect information from both of them, and then ask them about any other person they know about who are having STD. So this person also identifies three more, this person also identifies three more. So like this chain goes on. So this is known as snowball sampling or network sampling. You know what is snowball? In the downhill in a snowy mountain or hill, what happens if you roll a small sized snowball, it collects more snows around it while going down and increase in size, gets bigger. So this is same. As we go proceed forward, we get more and more number of samples, right? So this is why this is known as snowball sampling as well as network sampling. Also in case of the COVID right now, if we find out a case, we ask about his contacts, close contacts. Some of them, so he identifies two contacts, we test them. Suppose out of 4 or 5 contacts, these two have only tested positive. Now we ask them about their contacts. Who are the people he has been close to or in contact with? So maybe this person has identified 6 or 7 more contacts, and out of them 3 have been found to be COVID positive. So like this also, this snowball sampling can go forward. Okay, what is quota sampling? This is more or less like stratified sampling, which is a probability sampling. researchers are given quotas to fill from defined strata of population, keeping the proportion of quotas same as the observed in the population. Example, in a village, Hindu and Muslim population are 60 and 40% respectively. The researcher, by the method of quota sampling, can select by his own choice the same ratio of 6:4, Hindu and Muslim. So that means, suppose I am going to this example. So we had 200 students, 70-30 urban rural differentiation, so 140 from rural and urban and 60 from rural. Also you had to maintain 50-50 ratio among boys and girls, right? So what we could do, out of this 70 girl students from urban, if we randomly select 7 girl students from this, 7 boy students from this 70 boy students from urban, 3 girl students randomly from 30 girl students from rural, and 3 boy students randomly from 30 boy students from rural. This will be my stratified random sampling. Why? Because I am selecting these 7 students, 7 girl students randomly, like this, 7 boy students randomly, 3 girl students randomly, and 3 boy students randomly from this population. Now, after making this stratification, if I selected 7 girl students from this 70, not randomly but according to my convenience, right? I know that I have to select 7 students here, 7 boy students here, 3 girl students here, and 3 boy students here, so as to maintain the 70%, 30% urban rural differentiation, as well as boy and girl 50%, 50% differentiation. But the method of selection of sample in the last stage is not random but according to my convenience. It would be called the quota sampling, right? Remember, I am filling up the quota. By quota here I mean the percentage differentiation, urban rural as well as boys and girls. So the sample follows the quota. The differentiation percentages are maintained, but it is different from stratified random sampling in only one way, that is, here the students are being selected not randomly but by convenience of the researcher himself. Okay, so this is the only differentiation between the stratified random sampling and quota sampling. Another is self-selection sampling. For example, customer satisfaction survey. Participants take part in the research on their own as volunteer when asked. So suppose we have made a new device, say it detects blood sugar. So you know there is a glucometer available. I have made a new device, glucometer. So what I know, whether the customers are satisfied or not. Sometimes what happens, people who are very satisfied, they want to come forward and give us their feedback. So what will happen? It will have a biased view, because in all the feedbacks, most of them will be positive feedback, because all those who have been benefited from this new device, they have come forward. The reverse can also occur, like people who are very much unhappy with the new device, they will come forward and start complaining about that, right? So the customer satisfaction survey will show lot of negative feedback because people are angry, they are not satisfied. So that is another non-probability sampling, and this is definitely a biased kind of sampling. So these are all different kinds of sampling. So anyway, in this discussion, we talked a few things about biostatistics, but I remind you again, we talked only about the basic part of the biostatistics. We knew what are data, what are the different type of data, how they can be presented in tabular form as well as different diagrams. I have not gone into the details about preparing the tables and diagrams, which will be discussed separately in practical classes. Then we talked about central tendency, mean, median, mode, as well as dispersion, that is deviation, standard deviation, etc. We talked about normal curve and how standard deviation and mean value tells us about the population distribution. Also we talked about sampling, different sampling method, probability and non-probability, and this can come as a long question or as a short note, anything. So please go through your book. Not all the part are present in your book of PARCC, that I can assure, because the sampling is not taken from the book of PARCC. After the end of the session, if you have any difficulty understanding anything, please let me know and I shall try to give your answer. Thank you very much.